Welcome to the deep dive. If you're here, you're looking for a shortcut, a fast track to fluency and the absolute cutting edge of science. And today, we've got a stack of research that is, well, it's truly next generation. We're covering materials, computation, and even biology.
It's an expansive mission, for sure. We are looking at three distinct, they're pretty complex areas. We've got new physical devices that can actually sort particles, a completely novel computing architecture, and then the biological applications that desperately need all this new power.
And the unifying theme here, the thread that really ties all of this together, is how we're engineering fundamental quantum mechanical principles. I mean, we're not just observing quantum mechanics anymore. We are building it into practical tools.
Yeah, our goal is to make sense of this for you, to help you understand how these really abstract concepts like quantum geometry or photonic noise are becoming the building blocks of tomorrow's technology.
So we're going to dive into a device called a chiral fermionic valve.
An optimization machine named Dirac-3, and then we'll look at why quantum computation is becoming an absolute necessity in single-cell biology.
It's a steep climb, so we're starting at the most fundamental level with the device,
Yeah,
with the idea of building something that can control matter right down at the particle level.
exactly. The starting point is something called a topological material.
Okay, let's unpack that. When we talk about controlling particles, why start with these exotic materials? What's special about them?
Well, we start with what are called multifold topological semimetals. Inside of these materials, you get fundamental particles, fermions, that come in essentially two types. They have opposite chiralities or handedness.
Right, chirality. The easiest way to think about it is like your hands or a screw. Some thread to the right, some to the left. And so the challenge has always been, how do you separate a stream of left-handed particles from right-handed ones?
Traditionally, you had to use these massive magnetic fields, or you'd have to chemically dope the material with magnetic impurities.
Which is just terrible for actually building a device, right?
Yeah.
It's hugely power hungry, and it really limits how small or practical you can make the final chip.
Completely. But this breakthrough we're looking at, it solves this problem by getting rid of the magnet entirely. Researchers created what they call a chiral fermionic valve from a single crystal of palladium gallium, or PDGA, and they etched it into a little three-arm geometry.
Okay, so the big takeaway here is we're replacing a massive external force magnetism with a finely tuned internal property of the material itself.
Precisely. We're using its own quantum geometry to steer the particles. That's the control breakthrough.
And this material, PDGA, is special.
It's fascinating. It has what's called intrinsic crystallographic chirality. Its internal atomic structure is naturally twisted, doesn't have any mirror planes. The goal was to use that built-in twist to filter fermions by their handedness into different streams of current.
So how does that actually work? I mean, how does the material's quantum shape physically push particles into one arm versus another?
This is really the core aha moment of the research. The separation happens because of something called the nonlinear Hall effect. It's not driven by normal electrical forces. It's driven by the material's quantum geometry, creating what are called anomalous velocities.
Okay, that sounds pretty dense. Can we break that down a bit?
Absolutely. Think of the electronic energy bands inside the material. They aren't just flat surfaces. They have a curvature, which physicists describe with something called the Berry curvature. And this curvature, along with the quantum metric tensor, it basically acts like an internal slope.
Like a gravitational field, but for electrons.
That's a great way to put it. It dictates their path even when you're just applying a simple, straight electric field.
So instead of a magnet pushing things around, the shape of the quantum energy landscape itself decides where the particles go. That's completely non-intuitive.
It is. And the researchers proved it. In their three-arm device, particles scatter differently based on where they start on that energy landscape. So particles from one particular pocket, which has a topological fingerprint, a Chern number of -4, they all get scattered into one of the outer arms.
And I'm guessing the particles from the opposite pocket, which would have the opposite Chern number, +4.
They get scattered into the other outer arm.
Exactly.
And the trivial electrons, the ones without that distinct topological fingerprint, they tend to go down the middle.
So you've done it. You've achieved spatial separation based purely on an abstract quantum property. These are what you called Chern number polarized states.
That's the term, yeah.
Okay, but showing you can separate them is one thing. To make a useful device, it needs to be stable, right? Why was proving coherence such a big deal?
Because that's the critical step for any kind of engineering. The scientists proved the long-range phase coherence of these separated currents. over 15 micrometers, which is a huge distance on a chip. They ran the currents through a Mach-Zehnder interferometer and actually saw quantum interference patterns.
So that interference proves they aren't just random streams of electrons. They're maintaining their quantum phase relationship over a real distance. That's essential for a quantum circuit.
It's the difference between a neat physics experiment and a potential building block for technology.
And if they're separated and coherent, what are the real-world consequences? What can you do with this?
Well, first, these separated chiral currents carry orbital magnetizations with opposite signs. So this PDGA structure gives you a completely non-magnetic, purely electric way to create and tune magnetization.
And the control mechanism, the valve part?
The control knob is essentially the electric field-induced orbital angular momentum dipole, or OAM dipole. By applying an electric field, you can shift that dipole and decide which current, which handedness is going to dominate.
So you can have passive control just by the way you orient the crystal, or you could have active control by integrating it with standard electronics, like a magnetic tunnel junction. This really feels like material science, fundamentally changing electronics.
It's a huge leap in control, from brute external forces to elegant internal quantum geometry.
Okay, let's completely shift gears. We've just talked about controlling matter at the particle level. But what about controlling the complexity of real-world math? That's an even bigger fight. Which brings us to a new kind of computational architecture.
Right, we're moving into the world of optimization.
Right.
So many of society's most critical problems, logistics, resource allocation, drug discovery, they fall into a category called NP-hard.
Meaning they grow exponentially in complexity. The number of possibilities becomes so vast that even our biggest supercomputers just give up.
They just can't check all the options. It would take longer than the age of the universe. So we need a new way to search.
Enter entropy computing.
Exactly. This is a totally novel paradigm. It's been experimentally demonstrated in a hybrid photonic electronic system they call Dirac-3. And what it does is, it's very creative. It conditions a quantum reservoir, in this case an optical system, using carefully controlled loss and gain.
And the whole point of that is?
The goal is to drive the entire system toward its state of minimum entropy, minimum disorder. And when the system settles into that state, that physical state corresponds exactly to the optimal solution of the math problem you encoded into it.
So how are you encoding the information in light? It's not standard qubits, is it?
No, and that's a key advantage. Information is encoded in high-dimensional photonic qubit.
A qubit, so it's a richer quantum bit. Instead of just a 0 or 1, you can have, what, 0, 1, 2, 3, using different properties of the light?
That's a perfect way to think about it. In this case, they use time-bin states. And to do it, they use these ultra-low, mean, coherent states of light. We're talking less than 1% of the light pulses having more than a single photon. It's light operating right at the quantum limit.
This sounds way more flexible than the quantum annealers or Ising solvers we usually hear about. What's the fundamental advantage here?
There are a few major ones. The core benefit is the flexibility of Dirac-3's objective function. Traditional Ising solvers are very rigid. They're stuck with binary variables, yes or no, and only 2 variable interactions.
Okay, so what's advantage number 1 for Dirac-3?
The variables themselves. It naturally handles variables over discretized space. That means you can model problems where the answer isn't just yes or no, but maybe a number from 1 to 10. That's crucial for resource allocation.
And the second advantage you mentioned was the complexity of the interactions.
Right. It supports incredibly high-order polynomial terms. They demonstrated interactions up to 5th order. That's 5 variables, all interacting at the same time, directly in the hardware.
Which means you don't need all that computational overhead just to map your complex problem onto a simple piece of hardware.
Exactly. And that leads to the third advantage. It naturally allows for dense long-range interactions. You don't have to spend half your effort just translating the problem into a language the computer can understand.
And there was a fourth one, a constraint advantage.
Yes. It can naturally incorporate a sum constraint. You can tell the machine the sum of all your final variables must equal this specific number R. That is indispensable for things like portfolio optimization, where you have a fixed budget.
So it's a fundamentally more practical design. How did it actually perform?
Extremely well. On one non-convex quadratic problem, Dirac-3 found the best possible answer, the ground state, in almost 80% of the runs. That blew standard classical gradient descent out of the water. It also outperformed an advanced classical method called SDP on the NP-hard Max-Cut problem for a 30-node graph.
That's a huge deal, but why? Why is it so good at avoiding those local minima, those traps that classical systems fall into?
This is the most elegant part. The physics of the system is the solution. The high performance is directly linked to the shot noise of single-photon counting.
So the randomness that's inherent to quantum measurement, it's a feature, not a bug.
Precisely. That noise is leveraged as a source of quantum fluctuation, or entropy, in each feedback loop of the machine. It's just enough of a jiggle to help the system hop out of a suboptimal solution, to jump out of a shallow valley and keep looking for the deepest one.
So the noise is a search tool.
It is. They actually found the solution quality got better when they operated at a lower mean photon number, because that maximizes the effect of that fundamental quantum fluctuation. They call it quantum tunneling-like behavior.
It's a beautiful loop. The physics of light provides the entropy needed to solve these incredibly complex math problems.
Okay, so now let's take that computing power and apply it to maybe the most complex system of all, biology.
We're going from engineered materials to optimized computation straight into biology. And we're not talking about old-school biology. High-resolution tech, like single-cell transcriptomics, lets us track thousands of genes and proteins in one single cell over time.
The amount of data is just staggering. It's generating oceans of information, and our classical AI models are, well, they're hitting a wall.
What are the specific limits? Where are they failing?
First, classical AI really struggles to generalize. It tends to overfit the training data. And second, this is critical for medicine, they often fail in sample-limited contexts. If you only have a few patient samples, the models just can't learn effectively.
And they just can't scale, right? The time and memory they need grows quadratically. They can't capture the whole global picture of what's happening in a cell.
That's it. And that's why the quantum solution is becoming necessary. So many of these cellular dynamics problems, predicting how a cell will react to a drug, for instance, have complexity that grows exponentially. And exponential problems are a perfect natural fit for quantum computing's power for superposition and entanglement.
So what are the immediate, most transformative applications where you see quantum computation just leapfrogging classical AI?
I think we're looking at temporal modeling in cell trajectory, basically, understanding how a cell changes its identity over time. That's a massive optimization problem. Also, integrating multimodal omics data, combining the gene data, the protein data, the metabolism data, and finding the meaningful interactions between them all.
And what about imaging and spatial data?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It could be crucial for image and spatial segmentation, helping us process that fine-grained spatial data that's non-negotiable for precision medicine. The end goal is to build a quantum-enabled multimodal model of a cell.
So the bigger picture here isn't just quantum hardware replacing a server rack in a hospital.
No, not at all. The real goal is the confluence of quantum computing, advanced classical computing, and these incredible high-resolution biological assays. That specific combination is what's going to generate truly transformative predictive models of how our cells behave, and that's how you advance precision medicine.
What a journey. We started with fundamental physics, with a PDGA device that can spatially separate particles based on their inherent topological geometry.
Then we jump to the DRAC-3 machine, a photonic computer that uses the intrinsic randomness of quantum shot noise to solve these incredibly difficult optimization problems.
And finally, we saw how these new ways of computing are desperately needed to tackle the exponential complexity of understanding a single living cell.
And that through line, that control mechanism, is what ties it all together. It's always rooted in a physical degree of freedom. In the PDGA, it was the electric field shaping the OAM dipole. In DRAC-3, it was quantum fluctuation, the shot noise driving the surge.
That feels like the critical takeaway. Controlling these cutting-edge systems requires harnessing fundamental, almost exotic physics. It's not just about writing better software anymore.
Not at all. This deep dive really shows that progress at the smallest scale and the largest scale both depend on leveraging quantum phenomena.
Which leaves us with a provocative thought for you to consider. The chiral fermionic valve uses quantum geometry to create an OAM dipole that acts as a control knob. The DRAC-3 machine uses quantum fluctuation to escape traps in optimization problems. Given that solving our hardest problems now seems to rely on integrating and controlling these exotic physical phenomena, is hardware innovation driven by quantum mechanics now the primary bottleneck for progress?
Has the era of purely software-driven revolution finally reached its physical limits?
Something to mull over until our next deep dive. See you next time.